There is a quiet group of people who exist online like ghosts in the machine. They scroll, read, observe, sometimes even comment, but their faces never appear. Their accounts are filled with thoughts, music, or quotes, but no trace of who they are. They are present and invisible at once, walking the digital corridors without leaving an image behind. And yet, behind this absence of photos, there is not always shyness or insecurity. Often, it is something far more complex, a mixture of emotional protection, self-awareness, and silent rebellion against a culture that demands visibility as proof of worth. To them, the act of not posting is not negligence, but a statement. It is a subtle gesture that says, "I exist, but I do not owe you evidence." They may look at endless faces on their screens, smiling, curated, polished, and feel a quiet detachment. Something in them resists the flattening of human presence into an image. For some, the camera feels invasive, reducing life's mystery to a performance. For others, it evokes anxiety, the fear of being seen and yet misunderstood, exposed yet unseen in essence. And so they remain in a delicate balance between connection and withdrawal. They feel both close and distant from the world, part of the social current, but unwilling to surrender completely to it. If they could explain, they might say they are protecting something sacred, the right to exist without being constantly defined. Their silence, their facelessness, is not emptiness. It is a quiet fullness, the presence of someone who chooses depth over display, privacy over proof. To understand why some people choose not to post their photos on social media, we must step gently into the intersection between psychology and selfhood. That fragile place where the inner image of the self meets the external demand to be seen. From a psychological perspective, this behavior can be seen as a form of self-regulation. Social media platforms operate within what sociologist Irving Goffman called the stage of self-presentation, where individuals curate and manage the impressions they make on others. Those who refrain from posting photos are, paradoxically, also managing impressions, through absence rather than display. Their silence is a form of communication, an aesthetic of invisibility that asserts control over their own narrative. This restraint often stems from self-discrepancy, the gap between the real self, the ideal self, and the socially perceived self. When this gap feels too wide, exposure becomes emotionally risky. A photo, after all, can crystallize that dissonance. The face that others see may not align with the self one feels. Thus, not posting becomes a shield against that confrontation. Another psychological layer lies in objectification theory. In a digital environment where the body becomes a consumable image, some individuals instinctively resist turning themselves into an object of gaze. Their refusal is an act of preservation, protecting the integrity of self-experience against a world that thrives on external validation. For them, privacy is not secrecy. It is a boundary drawn to defend the depth of subjectivity. There is also the question of social comparison. In an economy of likes and attention, images become currency. Each uploaded photo invites comparison, not only with others, but with one's past self, one's filtered self, one's imagined self. Those who abstain may do so to protect themselves from this silent, exhausting game. Their abstention can be both defensive and dignified. A refusal to participate in a system that rewards visibility over authenticity. And yet, introversion, sensitivity, or a contemplative temperament may deepen this pattern. For such individuals, inner life feels more vivid than the spectacle of appearance. They are not drawn to the lens because their sense of worth comes from reflection rather than reaction. The absence of photos, then, is not a void, but a mirror turned inward, an act of introspection performed in public silence. In this way, The psychology of those who don't post their photos is not about lack of confidence, lack of participation, lack of belonging, but about balance. They are quietly negotiating the tension between self-expression and self-protection. They may long to be known, but on their own terms, within their own rhythm, and by those who care to look beyond the surface. Here lies the paradox. The very act that protects the self may also confine it. To not post one's photo is to retain power over one's image, but it is also to risk invisibility. The wall built for safety becomes, over time, a quiet enclosure. Privacy shields the soul, yet it can also mute its voice. In the absence of images, others may begin to fill in the blanks. They might imagine a face, a demeanor, or even assign motives: aloofness, insecurity, pride, mystery. In digital spaces, silence speaks loudly, and the faceless person becomes a projection surface for others' assumptions. What began as an act of self-definition transforms into a space of misinterpretation. And this is the price of protection. Control and misunderstanding coexist. The individual feels safer, but also lonelier. Safe from distortion, yet denied recognition. To be unseen can preserve authenticity, but it can also foster a subtle ache, a sense of existing only in fragments. When one refuses to appear, others may forget to look deeper. There is another paradox, that the avoidance of exposure may itself become a hidden form of dependency. The person who withholds their photo may think they are free from the judgment of others. Yet the very decision is often made because of that judgment. It is a rebellion that still orbits the system it resists. The non-poster may still check how others perform online, quietly measuring themselves against the spectacle they have refused. Their invisibility becomes a different kind of engagement. Passive, reflective, but not detached. At times, this restraint carries a quiet pride, a sense of being above the crowd, of not needing validation, but pride too can imprison. It demands consistency. Once you've declared yourself immune to the need for visibility, showing yourself can feel like a betrayal of your own principle. The image then becomes taboo, a symbol of surrender. Thus, self-control turns rigid, and freedom becomes discipline. For others, the avoidance hides vulnerability. They fear what might surface in the gaze of others, not only flaws, but truths. A photograph can reveal emotion even to oneself. It fixes what we sometimes wish to keep fluid. To stay unseen is to remain unpinned, unfrozen. Yet life without witness can begin to feel unreal. The paradox deepens further. In the attempt to remain authentic, one risks disappearing. In the effort to preserve integrity, one may forfeit intimacy. The face, withheld to protect the soul, also carries the power to connect. We long to be seen, not as objects, but as presences. And yet, to reveal that longing feels unbearably raw. The human psyche oscillates between two hungers: the hunger for privacy and the hunger for recognition. Both are legitimate, both are costly. People who never post their photos live in that delicate middle space, where protection tastes faintly of solitude, and solitude quietly asks to be witnessed. Their lives illustrate a universal truth. Every freedom carries a shadow, and every act of self-defense carves its own kind of wound. Beyond psychology lies a larger question. What does it mean to exist in a world where existence seems to require proof? The face, once a simple vessel of presence, has become an emblem of belonging. To be seen online is to affirm one's participation in the collective mirror of humanity. But those who choose not to show themselves are quietly redefining what it means to be. They suggest that presence might not always need evidence, that the essence of being could lie in something subtler than visibility. In every era, the human being has wrestled with the need to be witnessed. In ancient rituals, in love, in prayer, the yearning has always been the same: See me, and by your seeing confirm that I am real. The digital age amplifies this need to near addiction. Visibility becomes oxygen, and the screen becomes the altar. Yet, to not post is to refuse this ritual, to stand outside the cathedral of constant validation. It is an act of existential defiance, not always loud, but profoundly symbolic. Perhaps those who hide their faces are performing a kind of spiritual minimalism. They are decluttering their identity from images, practicing a quieter form of existence, one that trusts in inner being over external affirmation. Their choice echoes an ancient truth, that the soul, in its depth, is not a spectacle, but a mystery. To remain unseen may be a way of guarding that mystery from dissolution in the glare of collective attention. But the cost of this refusal is also metaphysical. When we hide, we lose a form of connection that is older than words. The human face as a bridge between consciousnesses. The eyes, the expression, the unguarded moment of being seen. These are not just social gestures, but spiritual exchanges. They remind us that we are mirrored in others, that identity is not built in isolation, but in recognition. The person who never appears online might keep their essence intact, but they may also drift into a kind of existential solitude. A life without mirrors, without witnesses. Still, there is quiet dignity in their stance. They remind us that being seen and being known are not the same. One can be widely visible and profoundly misunderstood. Another can be invisible yet deeply known by a few. To not post is to bet on depth over breadth, meaning over metrics. It is to say, if you wish to know me, look for my words, my silences, my choices, not my image. The digital world tempts us to flatten being into appearance. But perhaps these unseen souls are keeping alive a forgotten wisdom. That mystery is a form of truth, and that the self, unphotographed, still exists in full color beneath the surface. They stand as quiet philosophers among us, questioning the modern creed that says, I post, therefore I am. In the end, perhaps the choice not to post one's photo is not about rejection, but refinement, a turning inward toward a truer form of presence. It is not an act of hiding, but of choosing where and how to exist. When a person withholds their image, they may be creating space for something else to speak. The tone of their words, the integrity of their thoughts, the quiet rhythm of how they move through the world. We often forget that authenticity does not require visibility. The truest moments of being alive are rarely photographed. A shared silence, a private realization, a passing tenderness no lens could capture. People who do not post their photos are, in a sense, preserving these moments from performance. They are protecting the natural intimacy between the self and its experience, refusing to turn it into something to be consumed. And yet, healing does not mean permanent withdrawal. It means finding a way to exist that feels honest. Some may one day post a picture, not out of compliance, but out of peace. Others may never do so and still live fully seen, by those who have learned to perceive beyond surfaces. The essential task is not to appear, but to be. To live consciously in the digital era is to understand that both showing and not showing carry weight. The goal is not to abolish one for the other, but to move with awareness between them. To know when to reveal and when to remain unseen. For visibility without meaning is noise, and privacy without connection is isolation. Wisdom lives in the balance, so perhaps the ones who do not post their faces are not missing from the world at all. They are simply inhabiting it differently, quietly, deeply, and on their own terms. Their absence is not an absence of self, but an assertion of sovereignty over what it means to exist. And in that silence, they teach us something profound. That being known is not about being looked at, but about being understood. The face unseen is still a life unfolding, real, thoughtful, and free.